Okay, guys, let's talk about some of the robber barons and urbanization during this historical time. So the question is whether these were these super rich guys with these great companies were good guys or bad guys. The first really multi-millionaire that we're going to talk about is Cornelius Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt is a railroad tycoon who started off actually in the steamboat industry. And he made a fortune basically taking control of railroads in the East. Everything all the way to Chicago, up through Boston, New York City, down into Pennsylvania. And he pretty much had a monopoly on all of that. He was pretty ruthless in that anybody who wanted to tie into his railroads, that he did not allow it. He did a lot of hostile buyouts. And ultimately, he is going to establish Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. That's what he pretty much does with his money. At Vanderbilt's death, he was worth about $100 million. That translates into about 1.7 billion in today's market. So Jay Gould, he was kind of a poor guy when he started out, and he is a land surveyor, and then he saved enough money to start a tannery, and then he started to invest in the stock market and went to work for Vanderbilt. And while he was working for Vanderbilt, he actually used some devious means to beat Vanderbilt to the punch when he was going to buy some assets. And he is going to use he's going to force a group of investors to kind of water the stock, and it gets a little complicated. Hopefully you watch that in The Men Who Built America. He's going to use his money to buy Western railroads and interest in the Western Union Telegraph Company. So Gould wasn't a really good guy, but when he died, he's going to be worth about $77 million, and that's 1.6 billion in today's money. Most of you have heard of this man, Andrew Carnegie, kind of a handsome dude, and he had been a Scottish immigrant who came to America, very poor. He really worked his way up. So he got with Bessemer, if you remember Bessemer, the fellow that came up with the cheap way to make steel, and he does invest, and he is going to put that money in Carnegie Steel Company. And when he does something called vertical consolidation, which we're going to talk about. And vertical consolidation is basically controlling every aspect of his business. When he sells out Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan, J.P. Morgan pays $250 million. It's a consortium, a group of people, which is $5.2 billion today. He is going to be the richest man, basically, in the world at that point. He's going to come up with an idea called the Gospel of Wealth, which we'll talk about. And he is going to end up giving about 70% of his money away to charity before he dies. And with the remaining, we still have the Carnegie Foundation that continues to give money back to society. So this is a legendary banker, J.P. Morgan, and he is considered really the most famous banker in the world. He put together lots of deals, and he financed lots of the other robber barons. And again, if you watched Men Who Built America, he's going to kind of screw Edison out of Edison Electric, and he's going to form General Electric. He'll form the first billion-dollar corporation with U.S. Steel, and probably one of the most powerful men in America. He actually bails America out on a couple of occasions when they're in financial difficulty. He was on a lot of different boards, and when he died, he left a fortune of $70 million, 1.3 billion in today's money. Andrew Millen was also in the banking business, and he started his own lumber business when he was only 17 years old. But his big deal is he's going to invest in aluminum, this lightweight material that's found, and he will find Alcoa aluminum. He will be the Secretary-Treasurer of the Treasury throughout the 1920s under President Harding, President Coolidge, and President Hoover, and told everybody, hey, don't worry, this depression thing will be over real quick. So he was kind of wrong about that. He's going to donate $10 million in art to the Museum of Modern Art, into the Smithsonian, and just what he's probably best known for is that decade as Secretary of the Treasury for the United States. So, of course, this is John D. Rockefeller. And John D. Rockefeller, the oil guy, super, super rich. He is going to have a monopoly on oil called the Standard Oil Company. He is going to buy out everybody. He'll buy out he has all the oil refineries. He's going to buy out most of these independent oil drillers, wildcatters that they were, and he is going to actually control main businesses. Main businesses during that time were, of course, oil and steel. Was these companies, individual ownership partnerships, they just got too big for that, and so corporations are formed, and corporations are pretty easy to form. Actually, you just need about 3 people, and you need a president, vice president, a secretary, treasurer, and you put a value on your company and you issue stock. So you can actually own all your stock, or you can sell your stock, and as your company grows, your stock grows in value. So why would you form a corporation? Well, if you're great big, you need the money, and you need the money to buy out other companies and to expand. Also, it limits liability. If you are the sole owner of your business and not incorporated, and something goes wrong, you can be sued for everything. They take your house, your personal bank accounts, even future earning. But if you're incorporated, that can't happen. You have a limited liability. And you might have seen that like with dentists, doctors, they have LLC, and that is limited liability corporation, and that is done to protect themselves. Another reason for corporations is to diversify. So you're not just doing one product, but you might have several different companies under your corporation. So this is just some vocabulary that is useful to know. Stockholders, those are people who own the corporation through your shares. So if you buy a share in Microsoft, you actually are a part owner of Microsoft. A monopoly is a single company that controls an entire market. This is illegal because there's no competition, so somebody can set prices and gouge the public, and so monopolies are not legal. And then a trust was a way to hide monopolies at one point, but basically this is a board of directors that is over several other companies, and it's just this kind of legal term that allows one person or a board to manage other people. So this is an example. You can see the trustee is managing company A and company B at the same time. Okay, this is an example of vertical integration. Okay, so we talked about vertical integration If you own an oil company, you also want to own the pipeline that takes it to and from, the trucking company to deliver it, the drilling equipment. So you are buying or integrating companies that contribute to the production of the same end product. An example might be Burger King. Okay, so if you're Burger King, what would you buy to implement vertical integration? Okay, if you said things like the Coca-Cola company, the delivery trucks that are bringing in your equipment, maybe a paper company for all your paper goods, maybe a meat processing plant. All of those things contribute to your business, and that would be vertical integration. Okay, this is an example of horizontal integration. So again, if you're an oil company, Smith Oil, you're going to buy out Jones Oil and ABC Oil and XYZ Oil. So you are integrating companies that produce the same product. So let's talk about this same question. If you're Burger King and you're going to indulge, or if you're going to partake of horizontal integration, what do you do? So if you said you're Burger King, you would buy out maybe McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King. That is horizontal integration, buying out the same type of business. So are these guys robber barons or are they philanthropists? This is an example of the Biltmore Estate that Vanderbilt owned, his summer home. Ballroom on top, something like 50 bedrooms, huge dining hall, swimming pool, stable for the horses. This is just a huge estate that was used maybe 2 months out of the year by the Vanderbilts. It's now, from what I understand, a hotel. This is Vanderbilt's home in Hyde Park, New York. And he had the master bedroom done in the style of Louis XIV at the Versailles Palace. And everything in this room is gold. There's gold thread in the carpets, gold thread in the drapes. Everything is gilded in gold. This is a gold bedroom. And this house right now is a museum. You can go to it, but they won't let you walk inside the bedroom. J.B. Morgan once said that if you have to ask how much something costs, you can't afford it. So he liked his toys, things like yachts, and it said that he actually would light his cigars with $100 bills. Now this is when his workers weren't making $100 a month. So you be the judge. In 1890, they passed the first Anti-Trust Act, that is to eliminate or control monopolies, called the Sherman Anti-Trust Act. But it's really not going to be put into effect and used to limit business until the 1900s. But this is important, the first Antitrust Act, Sherman. During this time, a fellow named Herbert Spencer takes Darwin's theory of evolution and he applies it to corporations. And basically his idea is that only the strongest companies survive, that it's survival of the fittest, and that's healthy.
Karl Marx, Andrew Carnegie, Joseph Stalin, John D. Rockefeller, Adolf Hitler. What do these men have in common? From capitalists to communists, all found in a misinterpretation of Darwin, justification for the conduct of their lives. They seized on a phrase Darwin never used, survival of the fittest, and used it to rationalize attitudes and actions that affected the course of modern history.
In the late 19th century, there was a whole school of thought, or perhaps several schools of thought, which now are known as social Darwinism, which really used evolution as an underwriting of a fairly crude kind of competitive ethic in society, what we might call a free market ethic, but more than that, the notion of dog eat dog, the weakest to the war, and the phrase that Darwin's contemporary Herbert Spencer actually used for natural selection, which was survival of the fittest.
But Spencer thought evolution had a direction, from simple to complex, from inferior to superior. Darwin's version of the theory was not survival of the fittest. It could be better paraphrased as survival of those best adapted.
Well, the master race idea, from which we think of in connection with the 30s and with Germany, in some senses was the low point in the whole attempt to apply evolutionary and biological thinking to human affairs, because that's to turn a scientific theory into a moral statement or even a political statement, which of course it is not.
The Nazis taught that Jews were evolutionary throwbacks. The Aryan race, they said, was the pinnacle of evolution, and maintaining racial purity was an evolutionary obligation.
Well, it wasn't just Hitler who thought about the idea of applying biological ideas in a rather radical way to...
This is Herbert Spencer, and you can see that this can be used in a very bad way. Hitler, for instance, will talk about survival of the best, okay? Get rid of the inferior races, for instance, to create a better race. And they're going to use this same theory for eugenics, and you can see how this can be a very dangerous theory. Okay, just some more. Spencer argued that the number of unfit would eventually disappear because of their inability to compete with the fit, and a lot of this is going to be taken and applied to individuals, and some very, very kind of crazy folks that will use it to their benefit. So we talked about Carnegie, and with his great wealth, he comes up with something called the gospel of wealth. And he said, with great wealth, there is great responsibility, and that the wealthy should use their money to benefit society. Now, he's not going to give some poor guy a sandwich for his hunger, but he will build a library so that guy can go to the library and learn about how to make money to buy his own sandwich. A lot of his money is going to go to libraries, to universities. He actually is his Carnegie Foundation. If you ever watch Sesame Street and some of the PBS programs, you'll see this is funded by a grant from the Carnegie Foundation. So Carnegie's money is still at work benefiting society. This is a great political cartoon. They're showing kind of the relationship between the feudal lords in the Middle Ages and the robber barons of the 1800s. And you can see the peasants, of course, are doing all the labor, and they're giving the wealth to these feudal lords. And then in the 1890s, 1880s, 90s, and early 1900s, you can see the workers are doing all the work, and these fat cats on the right are taking all the wealth. And in the background, of course, you've got the factory spewing smoke into the air, and on the flag it talks about monopoly. So this is history repeating itself, the robber barons of the Middle Ages and the robber barons of today. This is a really great political cartoon. And lastly, we're going to talk about Russell Conwell and the Acre of Diamonds. Russell Conwell was a preacher, and he would travel around, and his famous sermon was called the Acres of Diamonds Sermon. And he talks about a poor farmer up in Arkansas. And this guy is working his fingers to the bone every day. He's, rocky soil of Arkansas. He's barely making a living for his wife and his 2 sons. And every day he goes out and he toils, and the weather is horrible, and the crops sometimes the weather is bad, and he's just year after year after year just barely making it. And then one day, as he's working in the field, he keels over, clutches his chest, and he has died of overwork, and his heart has just given out. Well, his family's poor. They have no means to pay for a funeral, so they take his body and they go out into the field and they start digging to give him a proper grave, and they dig down about 3 feet, and what is that glittering? And one of the sons reaches down and pulls out a big diamond. And they start looking around, they start digging a little bit deeper, and diamonds. They're finding a whole field, an acre of diamonds. And the moral of the story is wealth might be in your own backyard if you just dig deep enough.